Good evening, everybody. I have some thoughts and goals, and today we're going to talk about the SCOTUS nomination process for Amy Coney Barrett, the judicial candidate for Supreme Court Justice that was nominated by President Trump in 2020. This has been a fascinating process. It's so interesting to see the Senate meet the Judiciary Committee, who the chairman is Lindsey Graham, who I just find to be an interesting person. He's been in Senate for a bunch of years. And the entire process, with the fact that it's a pandemic, this is going to go down in history. People are going to be watching this years from now. I myself was looking up YouTube clips from Justice Scalia, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, from Elena Kagan, just kind of going back in time and seeing how things have changed. And I want to talk about this nomination. I want to talk about the parts that have been nonsense from the Democrats, the parts that have been nonsense from the Republicans, why overall I feel and just analyzing it, I feel the nomination has been, this is not the correct way to do this, and the Republicans know it. They're playing hardball politics, and I'll go into more detail of why I think that, but I think the justice herself, who will probably become Supreme Court Justice Barrett, is a fine candidate. It's President Trump and the Republican Senate that are playing politics, and they've made this whole process extremely political. It's not good for the long-term health of keeping politics out of the Supreme Court nominations, and there's historical reasons for this. The first of which is that I didn't know this before, but Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg got passed by the Senate by like 98 votes to 0 and 96 votes to 0, something like that, like 95 or 98 votes to 0. So that means this was bipartisan. Historically, it was. And we do not have a bipartisan nomination going on with this specific SCOTUS Judiciary Committee. And that is because of all the stuff surrounding Barrett's nomination. It's not because of Barrett herself, but she's also very interesting to just analyze and talk about. She's a conservative justice. She is probably going to vote conservative. And let's start off with the history. So in 1986, you have some old school players that we still see today in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So these are people like Senator Grassley, Senator Mitch McConnell, and Senator Biden, who obviously is running for president. And it's really interesting to see them way back in 1986 with a full courtroom talking to Justice Scalia, who I didn't know much about, but looking at the way Scalia was, who was a mentor for Justice Barrett, who I say Justice Barrett because she's going to get nominated, she's going to go right through, but they were, in 1986, they were way boring the way they were just asking questions. It was a lot more just a bunch of old white dudes in the 80s with that, like, just straight edge, bunch of squares, like just asking the most boring questions. And Scalia himself is pretty entertaining to listen to. He obviously very smart guy. He's an originalist. He believed that the Constitution does not update based on the whims of the present times. If we feel a way about law now, that shouldn't affect it as much. But he looks at the original Constitution and the documents and the way the laws were written and interprets them based on the text. That is his way of removing his own personal biases to just interpret the laws the way they ought to be interpreted. That's his line of thinking. If you take, one of his good friends who later was nominated to the Supreme Court, which is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She has passed away in September of 2020, and so that is Barrett is going to take her seat. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a totally different philosophy where justice is about justice for the people. So, she's known for being in favor of abortion rights, Roe v. Wade, and gay rights, and for women. Very progressive, even up until the current day in 2020. So watching, when I watched Senator Grassley, it was just so boring, just as boring as he is now. I didn't hear anything particularly interesting either now from him or from back then. And then McConnell is smart. All these people are smart, but they're different levels. McConnell is a sharp senator with a southern drawl from Kentucky, and he's just been in politics forever and ever and ever. Biden was a pretty young guy when in 1986. He just has this like young senator feel, whereas like McConnell acted pretty much the same way as he does nowadays. Biden was young. He was kind of overexcited. He was talking over Scalia. He would ask him like a question, and then he would ask him another question, ask him another question, and say, Scalia, what do you think? Let's get to know you. And Scalia would kind of throw back a joke, and the whole entire courtroom or, wherever they're having the Senate Judiciary Committee, everyone's laughing. Scalia's like, my 9 kids, I don't even remember their names. My wife, takes care of them. Like, she stays at home. I don't even know my kids' ages. And like, he went through and like got all his kids' names, and everyone like he named all 9 of his children as they stood up. And then at the end, he's like, "Whew, I'm glad I remembered all their names." And everyone in the courtroom's laughing, and it's just a different time. Like, men you should definitely know your kids' names nowadays. So looking at that history, this nomination, for as partisan as it is, you got Democrats and Republicans arguing back at each other, mostly during the current hearing, and not actually, the Democrats they had all these pictures of people that have been affected positively by the Obamacare ACA, and they put these pictures up and ask questions to Barrett that really aren't about her judicial jurisprudence, like the way she would look at a law. They're not interested in that. They already kind of know that Trump nominated a conservative 40, I think she's 40, she's in her 40s. She's very young. And she's only been a federal judge for 3 years, which was astounding to me. She clerked under Scalia, and there's just so little substance to the kind of questions that are being directed at this nominee. And the Republicans kind of are, nice to her, throwing her softball questions, keeping it light. And then the Democrats are just making a call to action saying, this nomination is rushed. We shouldn't be meeting during a pandemic. This room is not CDC compliant. And, they're right in a lot of ways. And I get the frustration from the Democrats because in the last year of Obama, Merrick Garland was nominated, who was left-leaning judge. It's the president's job to nominate a SCOTUS, Supreme Court justice. He did so, and because the Republicans controlled the Senate for 9 months, they delayed it because it was quote unquote an election year. So Obama, even though he made a nomination, the Senate never met because they were controlled by Mitch McConnell and the Republicans. So 9 months goes by, and then they put in Brett Kavanaugh, and the Republicans, because they controlled the presidency and the Senate, he got nominated right through. And now they're doing the same thing, even though it's an election year. The Democrats made this point many times that, and it's in fact true, over 9 million people have voted for the president right now, either Biden or Trump or some other party, they have already voted. We are 1 month away from knowing who our 2020 or president's going to be in 2020, whether it's Trump's second election or second term or Biden's first term. And in my view, it's not the will of the people. I will be playing you a clip from Ted Cruz explaining this process. So let's start. I'm watching the first day of the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and Lindsey Graham is the chairman. I really like Lindsey Graham, even though he's Republican, even though I probably wouldn't agree with him on any political things at all. He's a conservative. But, as a guy, I like him. He's reasonable. The way he speaks to people is with respect. He's charismatic. I'll tune into clips of him just doing his job in the Senate, and I like his appearances when he talks to other people. He's fair, he's cordial, and as opposed to someone like Mitch McConnell, who is like deadly smart but super, lifelong Republican, never going to change, party over everything. Just, in my opinion, that is the cancer of what's wrong with American politics at this time. But anyway, that's just my view on reading the room right now. So Lindsey Graham's the chairman, and he's a senator from South Carolina. He's up for re-election this year, which makes it a big deal. This is his time to be on the platform, showing to his state in South Carolina, vote for me again. And he remarked in his opening statements, right, day one, and by the way, this entire video is going to just be covering day 1 and day 2. It's my understanding there's going to be 5 total days, so no spoilers or anything. He says in his opening statements, Republicans hold 53 seats, Democrats hold 47 seats, the justice will be confirmed, everyone's going to talk back and forth at each other, Democrats going to be upset, let's get this thing rolling. He didn't say it in so many words, but he did say the first part. He just said, we're going to confirm this nominee. Let's go. So it's almost like as a person, as America watching this, what's the point of doing all this? Like, I know you have to officially do it, but if you're not going to follow this is not in the Constitution, right? The founding fathers surely did not come up with a system where we put all the senators in a room and argue back and forth and then interview the candidate a little bit and then pass it anyway. The fact that the chairman is being so cavalier and saying, we already know the vote, let's get this thing over with. I know why he's saying that, but it's a unique insight. I wonder if politics are going to be like this 30 years from now. This whole controversy is because it's an election year. Democrats want to pause the confirmation. They want to wait until after the election in case Biden wins over Trump. Democrats say this is unfair because Obama nominated Merrick Garland in his final year of the presidency. But at that time, the Republican held the majority seats in the Senate, so they didn't even start the hearing. So because the nomination would not have gone through, the leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell at the time, still is, did not allow a confirmation hearing to take place. A year went by, and the seat was eventually filled by Neil Gorsuch. Maybe I had that incorrectly. Maybe it wasn't Kavanaugh. It was one of the two. But most Democrats took the opportunity in their opening statements. A lot of them just read off of either handwritten notes or a typed up, just a prepared statement because they only had 10 minutes at the time. They opened up with healthcare. So most Democrats didn't open up. They either complain that it should, this whole thing shouldn't have been happening, it's being rushed, or pictures of, a kid that's smiling that had cancer that was saved by the ACA, or, things like that. To me, as an observer, doesn't seem like a good tactic. Now, obviously, they are right. What do I know? They have a tactic, and they're all together. And sometimes even a bad strategy, if the entire team is doing it, it's still a stronger strategy, if that makes sense. Like, if we're all on board, we're going to hit healthcare because we're in a pandemic. We're gonna try to appeal to Justice Barrett's empathy. And so when she rules whether the ACA is going to go through or not based on her legal analysis, maybe she'll think back and say, a lot of Americans might suffer if I were to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Just something to consider. But no matter what they say about this, the Democrats, it's a loss for them anyway. Republicans did not use the opening day to say much of value, with very few exceptions. So let's roll the Cruz clip. So this is Senator Ted Cruz.
And presidents have nominated individuals to fill those positions all 29 times, 100% of it. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. From a president's perspective, it's easy. If there's a vacancy, even during a presidential election year, you make a nomination. 44 individuals have served as president throughout the history of our country. Half of them, 22 of the presidents we have made Supreme Court nominations for vacancies that occurred during a presidential election year. But what has the Senate done? Well, again, the Senate precedent is quite clear, and is something that our Democratic friends do not want to address, do not want to confront. Of those 29 times, 19 of them occurred when the president and the Senate were of the same party. And when the president and the Senate are the same party, history shows that those nominees get confirmed. 17 of those 19 were confirmed for vacancies that occurred during a presidential election year. On the other hand, for those doing math at home, the remaining 10 occurred when the Senate and the president were of different parties. When the president and Senate are of different parties, the Senate over history has confirmed only 2 of those 10 nominees. Again, history is clear. The overwhelming majority of instances that the president and Senate are of different parties, that nominee doesn't get confirmed. That is, of course, what happened with Judge Garland, nominated by President Obama. President Obama was a Democrat, the Senate was in Republican hands, and following tradition of 200 years, the Senate did not confirm that nominee. Now, some might think the difference between whether the Senate and the president are of the same party or different party, that's just a question of partisan alignment, of partisan power. But that actually misunderstands the constitutional structure. The framers of the Constitution deliberately set up a system of checks and balances so that nobody can become a Supreme Court nominee without both the president and the Senate. Each was designed to check the other. That system of checks and balances limits power ultimately and protects the voters.
Yeah, so right there he already has it wrong, because if you really wanted to protect the voters, you wait for the election. They're rushing this process through. This isn't a partisan thing. I'm not agreeing with them because they're Democrats. It's just the case that if you want to protect what the voters want, this is at the end of some of the senators, like Lindsey Graham included, the end of his term. If you go with what the voters want, let the voters choose the president in 1 month's time and let them choose new senators and run this thing back again. If Trump gets reelected, then yeah, Trump will put through a conservative justice. And if there's enough senators that they have over 51 votes, send them through. The voters are signaling this is who we want in office. His statement makes sense. I follow all the logic, but it doesn't go with what you're saying, Cruz. Jesus.
Even if on any particular policy issue you might happen to agree with wherever a majority of the court is on any given day, who in their right mind would want the United States of America ruled by 5 unelected lawyers wearing black robes? It's hard to think of a less democratic notion than unelected philosopher kings with life tenure decreeing rules for 330 million Americans. That is not, in fact, the court's job. The court's job is to decide cases according to the law and to leave policymaking to the elected legislatures. Now, look, that doesn't mean policymaking is unimportant. In fact, it means to the contrary, policymaking is very important. And the people need to have a direct check on policymaking. You know what? If a rogue court implements policies you don't like, you, the American people, have very limited ability to check them. If a rogue Congress implements policies you don't like, you have a direct ability to check us by throwing the bums out and voting them out and voting in new representatives.
Exactly. So let people vote the way they're going to vote and don't rush this through right before an election. I mean, the logic is he's making the Democrats' point here. Vote the bums out. If the senators on the Republican side get voted out or the president gets voted out, then go through with the process. You don't need to rush through all of this to rush in another conservative justice, which will therefore put 5 people in charge that tend to vote conservative. It's just astounding me that he's making the exact same point why they shouldn't be going through with this nomination.
Much of the argument this morning has concerned Obamacare. And they've been policy arguments. They're policy arguments that are actually occurring in the Senate, which is the right place for them to occur, a legislative body. But our Democratic colleagues simply want a promise from a judicial nominee that this nominee will work to implement their policy vision of health care. That is not a judge's job. That is not the responsibility of a judge. And in fact, making that promise would be violating the judicial oath. I don't know what will happen in this particular litigation on health care, but I do know that this body should be the one resolving the competing policy questions at issue. Many of our colleagues talked about pre-existing conditions, and I think they have made a political decision. They want this to be the central issue of the confirmation. Well, remember this. Every single member of the Senate agrees that pre-existing conditions can and should be protected. Period. The end. There is complete unanimity on this. Now, it so happens that there are a number of us on the Republican side that also want to see premiums go down. Obamacare has caused premiums to skyrocket. The average family's premiums have risen over $5,000.
Okay, so this last bit kind of sounds boring, the last part of what he just said, but he's straw-manning the Democrats because, as we all know, that Lindsey Graham already said at the beginning, this is all just a farce anyway. Let's get this nomination on through. She's going to get voted through. And so, Democrats don't really have a voice here. I mean, no one's going to listen if they make a compelling argument. So they are just talking about, they're almost signaling to the American people and to the justice herself, look at all these people affected if you take away the ACA. So have empathy for the people, and which is not a legal argument, but it's a straw man for Cruz to say the Democrats are asking of the justice, to not act in her legal best interest. Everyone knows this. This is stupid. You're straw manning the opposite point, and Cruz is just playing partisanship here. No one is questioning. You can't tell a justice to rule a certain way. The justice, time and time again, when asked this question, said, I will have no bias. No one has asked me to, President Trump, I've not been in contact with him. He has not asked me to vote a certain way. That would be unethical. That would be against my federal, oath as a judge. And all that's true. So the last bit that he just said, he is addressing the Democrats' concern, but the Democrats are just bringing up points because they know it's not going to matter anyway. At least they can talk about healthcare and why try to get it's almost like the Democrats are taking this opportunity to brand. When a company is going through in business, if your company is going through a recession, that is a time to cut back on your marketing expenses and just start getting that brand equity. Like start putting out good PR about your company and build up that brand. Go, we're reliable people. We'll still try to get to you, but don't spend tons of money. And so this is what the Democrats are doing. They're in a recession. They're not making any sales right now, but they're trying to message out to the people. This is what the party is all about. So let's move on. Let me check my notes here. After this, more opening statements. Senator Klobuchar talked about healthcare, and it was really boring. And I've already said I'm not sure if it's a good tactic, but they know best. It was really refreshing to actually see, I mentioned him, Senator Sass from Nebraska. He said a few words about, let's keep this nomination process on track. He said, for the 8th graders out there watching, and for just the general American public who are interested in civics, almost doing their civic duty by watching the nomination process, seeing what they could learn, let's take a step back. Let's not throw politics at each other, and let's just talk about the system. And I'm going to play his clip here shortly. It really refreshing what he did. I don't know anything about this guy other than what I saw today. Let's take a look.
Judge Barrett, welcome. Congratulations. Jesse Barrett, congratulations. I just want to say, Senator Klobuchar said a number of things about COVID that I agree with. She cited a bunch of really painful stories in Minnesota, and similar stories could be told from across the country. I even agree with parts of her criticism of the mismanagement of COVID by Washington, D.C. I don't know what any of that has to do with what we're here to do today. Huge parts of what we're doing in this hearing would be really confusing to 8th graders. If civics classes across the country tuned into this hearing and tried to figure out what we're here to do, and they heard as much as they've heard about 2009 Finance Committee debates about what should be in a healthcare reform package. I'm blessed to sit not just on the Judiciary Committee, but also on the Finance Committee, and lots of the discussions we've had in here today fit better in a Finance Committee hearing than in a Judiciary Committee hearing. So I think it would be very useful for us to pause and remind ourselves and do some of our civic duty to 8th graders to help them realize what a president runs for, what a senator runs for, and on the other hand, why Judge Barrett is sitting before us today and what the job is that you're being evaluated for. So if we can back up and do a little bit of 8th grade civics, I think it would benefit us and benefit the watching country, and especially watching 8th grade civics classes. So I'd like to distinguish first between civics and politics, because there was a time, the chairman said at the beginning of this hearing, there was a time when people that would be as different as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she was a heroic woman, that's absolutely true, and Antonin Scalia, another brilliant mind and your mentor, people that different could both go through the Senate and get confirmation votes of 95 or 98 votes. And the chairman said at the beginning of the hearing, he doesn't know what happened between then and now. I think some of what happened between then and now is we decided to forget what civics are and allow politics to swallow everything. So if I can start, I'd like to just remind us of the distinction between civics and politics. Civics is the stuff we're all supposed to agree on, regardless of our policy views differences. Civics is another way we talk about the rules of the road. Civics 101 is the stuff like Congress writes laws, the executive branch enforces laws, courts apply them. None of that stuff should be different if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or a Green Party member. This is basic civics. Civics is the stuff that all Americans should agree on, like religious liberty is essential. People should be able to fire the folks who write the laws, and the voters can't fire the judges. Judges should be impartial. This is just Civics 101. Politics is different. Politics is the stuff that happens underneath civics. Civics is the overarching stuff we as Americans agree in common. Politics is the subordinate, less important stuff that we differ about. Politics is like if I look at my friend Chris Coons and I say, listen up, Jackwagon, what you want to do on this particular Finance Committee bill is going to be way too expensive and might bankrupt our kids. Or if Chris looks back at me and says, listen up, Jackwagon, you're too much of a cheapskate and you're underinvesting in the next generation. That's a really important debate. That's a political debate. That's not civics. Civics is more important than that. Civics doesn't change every 18 to 24 months because the electoral winds change and because polling changes. I think it's important that we help our kids understand that politics is the legitimate stuff we fight about, and civics is the places where we pull back and say, wait a minute, we have things that are in common, and before we fight again about politics, let's reaffirm some of our civics.
Yeah, I really like this guy. He does go on to, after this clip, he talks about how religious liberty is one of the foundations of American society, and that one's personal beliefs in God, or to worship at a mosque or to have no religious beliefs whatsoever, has no bearing. It does not belong in the courts. And, he makes that point in preparation in case Democrats start to attack the justice, or the nominee, I should say, for her Catholic faith, which means that would influence, because of her personal beliefs. She's personally in her own life against abortion due to her Catholic faith, and he's preempting it so the Democrats can't attack her for her personal views. It is political what he goes on to say, but what I liked about that clip is it's just helpful when someone is speaking to the American people and says, this is what politics are, this is what civics are. That was refreshing. I like him for that. But he does do his duties to the party a little bit after this clip. I didn't include it because it's just more partisan bullshit. Unfortunately, in the current climate, he is just making his point and his words will fall away. this process, what he's outlining, it's good to remember. It's a good reminder. It's refreshing. It won't change anything. Everyone's just playing two-party politics. The solution to this is people with their civic values as their basis for duty. It should not be with their values dedicated to the party. It shouldn't be where the money goes, who's making donations to get a certain congressman or senator elected, and it definitely shouldn't be about individual power and a career. So it's a good reminder for all that. The Senate and congressmen can be voted out. It's a simple thing. Also why I think they shouldn't be rushing this, but I've already made that point. So for this reason, the confirmation of justices should be represented by the people's choice in president, as well as the Congress and Senate. The problem with this line of logic is that it conflates the system that we have with the will of the people. And, they did go in to say that this is a representative democracy. So, people vote for the people in power, and then those people make the decision one way or the other. But yeah, that's just a huge part of what eventually might bring down our country. Maybe sooner than later, but who knows? Cruz that's where he did that dangerous switch. He appealed to the way the system is written in the Constitution, and he makes the same argument that it should be the will of the people. So that is kind of the fundamental problem with originalists, is they conflate the two things together. They say the way it was written in the Constitution is the way it should be, and then they also substitute, and it should be the will of the people, and if you don't like it, vote people out. And, I understand the distinction. It's very nuanced here. A judge's role is, in Senator Cruz's view and Scalia's view and Barrett's view, an originalism doctrine of just looking at what the law says, but then they make the switch that to choose people who do that, it should be the will of the people. The people should have the say in who they vote to represent them, and then those representatives need to say, okay, this is what I was elected for. Let's nominate a justice. And so what Cruz made a while back, you heard him do, is this is the way the law should be interpreted, and because the people have voted to elect us, we should rush this process through. Even as I'm talking through it, I see their point. And Republicans are playing by the rules, quote unquote, but it's not consistent in the way that they are applying it. And this is where politics is just so difficult, because by the rules of the game, this nomination is by the rules. Constantly you'll hear that other justices in the past were nominated, and then 16 days later, they were confirmed. That's what's happening in this case, but it is at the end of an election year. So you can't say it's the will of the people, because people are already voting for who the next senators and president will be. You can't have it both ways. And that is the dangerous thing that the Republicans are doing here. They're making it into politics, and they're appealing to the values that they're conflating between the two. Okay, I'm going to end that, because those are my thoughts from the day one. I will make another video about day 2 of the hearings, and we'll see if we keep on going from there. Day 2 was significantly longer. It's 11 hours, and I work from home, and so I just set it on times 2. I am 9 hours into that 11 hour. I skip through all the breaks and everything. And I listen to senators, and if they start to make the same point, I just skip right through them, and I'm not going to put them into this video unless they stick out, unless they're interesting of some sort. So Stay tuned if you want to keep up with this. For the next episode, I'm going to go over day 2. I'm going to talk about Senator Whitehouse and show you a clip of a few questions of the nominee Barrett. Thank you for watching. See you next time.